These are Nebraska corn farmers. They work in acres, not hours, harvesting the energy and climate solutions the world needs. We are proud to stand with you.
The success of tomorrow's soy industry depends on the actions we take today. The future is here, and the time to move is now.
Market Journal Television for Agricultural Business Decisions is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources in partnership with the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. Promotional support provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine and partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Bryce Duskett, and thank you very much for joining us today on Market Journal. On today's show, we are broadcasting from this year's Weed Management Field Day happening near Clay Center. We'll share some of the exciting highlights from today's event and give you insights into the research that's happening right behind us in these fields. Beyond today's events, Soybean Gall Midge has been detected in Nebraska. We'll get you the information on what's happening on that development. Plus, Heather Ramsey with the ARC Group, she'll stop by live and in person here on location to give us an update on the grain markets. We'll get to all those stories coming up here in a few moments, but we begin here. It's been an exciting week at the Eastern Nebraska Research and Extension Center near Mead. On Thursday, University of Nebraska-Lincoln officials hosted the opening of the new Klosterman Feedlot Innovation Center. This new state-of-the-art facility will help usher a new era of research and provide opportunities to students. The Market Journal team had a chance to get a peek behind the curtain of that brand new project, and here's what we saw.
My name is Doug Zaleski. I'm the director of the Eastern Nebraska Research Extension and Education Center. We're here at the Klosterman Feedlot Innovation Center, and this facility, a new facility that will be coming online as part of our efforts here at the Research Center, is really exciting. Because it was designed at a commercial scale, it fits in really nicely with the cropping side of things because we have the opportunity to produce crops on a commercial scale here as well. So when you talk about the circularity of ag production, we have the ability to incorporate this particular facility from the animal side into our cropping systems side of the operation here. And so we're excited about that and completing that circle as we produce the crops that are used to feed the animals here. The other part of, an exciting part of this is this facility was designed to look at new technologies and be able to incorporate precision agriculture on the animal side while we're doing the same thing on the crop side. And so again, as we move forward and look at precision agriculture, new technologies, we have the abilities, as this facility was designed, to give us the flexibility to incorporate new technologies just like we're using on the cropping system side. So excited about that and what that will bring and take us to a whole new level of research, extension, and education from this facility.
When we think about opportunities for our students to get engaged in industry applications, whether it's using new technology, facilities, handling equipment, looking at animal health, environmental concerns, all those things we have the opportunity to do here at this facility. The opportunities that our students have on the graduate student side to do cutting edge research on a commercial sized platform that then can be relatable to the industry is going to set us apart from all the others in the country when it comes to feedlot innovation, feedlot nutrition, feedlot research, and the applications that they can have nationwide.
We invite you to stay tuned as we'll have more on the specifics of this new facility here in the coming weeks on Market Journal. Well, it's that time for the main event. The reason we're here is the 2024 Weed Management Field Day happening here at the South Central Ag Lab. And joining us now to discuss this day's event and some of the research right behind us is Extension Weed Specialist Amit Jhala. Amit, thank you for the time. Big picture, what's this field day all about?
Yeah, I'm glad to be here and see the overall idea about this Weed Management Field Day that we organize every single year since I started with UNL. The main idea is just to let growers know about new technology coming to the market, new herbicide, any new technology such as this precision sprayer that was demonstrated today. We can demonstrate that, and we are also including chemical as well as some non-chemical method options such as how best we can incorporate cereal rye in our corn and soybean cropping systems, especially in under planting green conditions. That can provide better weed suppression. So that was the whole idea about just to show all the new research that we conduct at UNL for growers to adopt and consider.
From your perspective, I have to imagine the weed resistance that we continue to see is one of the biggest challenges facing these growers today. In particular, corn, soybeans, and sorghum is what you were showcasing. On the corn front, what were some of the chemicals and different trials you had this year?
We had a number of trials, and one of them was the best one I can say is the how best we can integrate herbicides with cereal rye cover crop, and that can provide effective weed control. So we had different termination timing of cereal rye after planting corn, and this year fortunately we had a lot of good rain. So although we have irrigation facilities available, we really didn't run irrigation until now. So there was no irrigation applied, so this can also represent the dry land agriculture basically. And our whole idea was just how best we can utilize cereal rye biomass that can suppress our major weed, which is Palmer amaranth, across the state, and it is resistant to number of herbicides. So just combining with cereal rye cover crop can add a lot of value for growers to manage herbicide resistant weeds, particularly Palmer amaranth.
Anything on the soybean front that you thought was interesting that you were trying out this year?
Similarly, in soybean, we have tried cereal rye, different termination timing after planting soybean, and yeah, results are really interesting to see how good soybean is to compete with cereal rye, even though if you terminate like after almost 10 days of planting soybean. So we had different termination timing, and it was also integrated with herbicide. So sometimes if you wait little longer to terminate your cereal rye, then it can provide better biomass and it can suppress Palmer amaranth early in the season, and then later on you just need to go with one post-emergence herbicide application, and that has provided really good weed suppression.
Well, as part of this year's field day, while we were having lunch, you reminded producers of an important day coming up. That's June 30th. Remind our audience what that date, what's the importance of June 30th, the cutoff date, right?
Right. So that's called cutoff date for dicamba-based herbicide application in dicamba-resistant soybean. As of now, we have 3 products which are labeled in dicamba-resistant soybean. That includes Engenia, Tavium, and Extendimax. So they have to be applied on or before June 30th, and that is not only the calendar date, but the first thing you need to consider is what is the growth stage of soybean. So when, for example, if it is Extendimax, then you should not apply after R1 growth stage in soybean. So that is something like whatever comes first, whether the growth stage of soybean or the June 30th. So yeah, those are the 2 things to remember, and make sure you apply those herbicides and follow all other label requirements, because this cutoff date is only one part of there are a number of other requirements, like wind speed has to be between 3 and 10 miles per hour, and there are some other requirements too.
If you're looking for a comprehensive resource when it comes to weed management here in Nebraska, we've got the tool just for you. You can get the 2024 Guide for Weed, Disease, and Insect Management in Nebraska. This 300-page guide has current research, UNL recommendations, as well as photos for easy identification. You can visit the Market Journal website for a direct link to get that booklet. Well, it is that time of the show where we turn our attention over to the grain markets, and joining us here on location at the South Central Ag Lab to discuss some of the current trends and numbers in the grain markets is Heather Ramsey. Well, let's talk about what's happening, and it's a busy week. I mentioned those scorching temps. At the end of the week, we'll have a report coming out. So let's just kind of size up as you see things, the trade that's happened thus far to Wednesday morning.
Yeah, to this point, I don't know that there's been a whole lot of positioning in the market actually related to the report, as much as we've seen some kind of end of the month, end of the quarter positioning. The July reference board for both corn, beans, Chicago wheat, Kansas City wheat. First notice day is the end of this week, and so we're doing a lot of cleaning house there. We've got to get out of positions and get through this delivery process that's coming. So there's been a lot of jockeying around there. I think that kind of led the week. So unfortunately, managed money has been sellers to this point all year. And I think they hit a number Tuesday morning that triggered some computer algorithm trading. So you've kind of got, the emotional human side of the market has been short. They traded it just low enough to kind of trigger some of those February lows. And that sent the computers spiraling on a sell. And unfortunately, that was a pretty brutal day. That's probably the most, awful feeling day from a farmer perspective of these markets that we've had recently. Then coming in here today on Wednesday, we're seeing a little bit of correction, a little bit of retracement. I think this is a pretty solid support level without any new information actually taking the fundamental side of these crops higher. And with the widespread variance in weather, I don't know that we have any record-setting crops here. Record-setting crops take favorable, consistent weather all the way across the Midwest, and that's not what we're seeing right now.
Let's talk about kind of the news as we sit right now. Continued flooding along the Missouri River, and as you and I were visiting about, the trade doesn't really want to speculate on how many acres might be sitting underwater at the moment.
Yeah, for some reason it's a lot easier to say something's burned up than something's flooded out. I've never really understood that mentality. You can survey acres just as easy whether they're flooded or dried out. But at this point, I think it's unknown on how quickly those waters will recede. And if they recede quick enough, it's not a complete loss. There's definitely damage there, but how much damage is the question. So along this northwestern Midwest, northern Midwest region, your northwestern Iowa, South Dakota, southern Minnesota, into Wisconsin, parts of northern Illinois, just a ton of water, and more projected coming their way. So it'll be a couple weeks, I think, before anyone really tries to speculate on how many acres have been, lost or destroyed. As far as then the eastern side of the Corn Belt goes, we are trading. Some condition ratings dropped here this week, and we are definitely able to see how poorly the eastern side looks, and so that's getting figured in. There's a sweet spot there in kind of southern Iowa and parts of Illinois that look really, really good, but outside of that, I would say Nebraska looks really good as well. And outside of that, a lot of question marks. All
right, well, a lot of question marks. I want to bring up a viewer question that came in this week. Eric chimed in after yesterday's trade. He said, with what happened yesterday, plus if we get a bearish report on Friday, is sub $4 corn out of the question?
I will never say never to prices. We've seen things go sky high that we never expected. I don't know why we couldn't see things trade lower versus what we expect to see. What I will say is the market does have a way of fundamentally getting back to that fundamental value. So when I say fundamentals, I'm talking about true supply and demand. The market has a way of getting back to that number. At this point, will we trade lower or higher than what fair market value is? Absolutely, we will do that. Could we see cash prices this week? If you're looking at harvest cash prices, could we see those prices be sub $4 cash? Absolutely. Can we see futures go sub $4 cash? Oh, I'd like to think not. I'd love to think not. I mean, that doesn't work for anybody. But the reality is the market's going to trade however the market feels like trading. And if they've got enough momentum built in on the money side or the computer side of things to push things lower for a time frame, they will. I think the better question, back to that viewer is, okay, but what have you done to protect yourself if that happens? You want to set yourself up as a farmer to withstand that time frame in which we trade an erratic number. And when we trade an erratic number higher, that's great, take advantage of it. But when we trade that erratic number lower, what have you done to set yourself up and protect yourself? And I think that's what we're always trying to do is the what ifs can totally happen. I've had my own customers, are we gonna see 380 cash corn? We might, maybe for, a couple weeks or a month or so. I mean, we definitely could. So what do we do to avoid that so that we don't have to actually make a decision in that time frame and then get stuck with those prices? So I think that's kind of the follow-up question or caveat to that viewer question is, all right, now what have you done in case that happens?
Let's put a bow on our conversation here. First 6 months, essentially the trading year in the books as of the end of this week. What give us maybe a bullish sentiment as we look at the next 6 months?
I think the next 6 months, the market starts looking at a whole global corn position. They've alluded to a global corn position and how important that is. They need the Northern Hemisphere to produce. The reality is the Northern Hemisphere is struggling. That's not just the US, that's Canada, Europe, Black Sea region. China's having issues in their growing region. So I think we shift from a very localized kind of weather into a more global, where is this corn crop, where is this wheat crop globally?
Thanks again to Heather for joining us out here at the Ag Lab. Well, over the 8 years of the Prairie States Forestry Project, a New Deal program fostered by President Roosevelt during the Great Depression era, 217 million trees, totaling more than 18,000 miles of windbreaks, were planted across the Plain States, including here in Nebraska. Today, these windbreaks have been removed. Some of them have been, but you might be surprised to learn that many remain and are still doing a good service to the landowners. You can learn more about maintaining, renovating, and planting new windbreaks in the June issue of the Nebraska Farmer. It is now time to check in on weather with Nebraska Extension meteorologist, ag meteorologist that is, Eric Hunt. Eric, it's been pretty hot to start the week. Enjoyable day here as we broadcast at the South Central Ag Lab, but how are things shaping up as we turn to the week ahead?
Thanks, Bryce. As we move into Sunday morning, we're looking like a very pleasant morning across the state with lows mostly in the 50s statewide, which will be a pleasant treat after that heat we had earlier this week. On Monday, though, we're going to pay attention to the short wave moving into the northern part of the plains. That's going to lead to a chance of severe weather across portions of central and eastern Nebraska. And right now, the WPC is relatively bullish on a lot of central and eastern Nebraska, picking up a ½ inch to maybe over 1.25 inches worth of rainfall. Some of that rainfall might be welcome, some of it won't be. As we move toward the middle of the week, the jet stream is going to be moving a little bit further south than where it's been recently, and we're going to be kind of in the active zone. And with a strong mid-level ridge parked over the southern U.S. and troughing toward north and northwest, central and eastern Nebraska are going to be in a stormy corridor for a good portion of this next week, particularly maybe Wednesday through Friday. It's going to be a little bit difficult to pinpoint right now exactly when precipitation will fall, but there's definitely going to be periods of precipitation with some chances of severe thunderstorms and heavier rainfall as we move into the later portion of the week, including on the 4th of July. So pay close attention to your local forecast as you get closer to the 4th. In terms of total precipitation the next week, the European ensemble is showing a good chance of at least 2 inches of rain across the eastern third of the state, with reasonable chances of 1 inch of rain getting out to about North Platte. Good news is almost everybody's expecting at least some rain this week, which is good news for the Panhandle where they could really use some extra precipitation right now. In terms of the 4th, it looks like relatively seasonal temperatures. Now, again, some of this may be influenced by cloud cover, but right now they were showing mostly in the 80s, which is not too bad for this time of year for us. In terms of the 8 to 14 day outlook, the CPC is showing pretty much the entire state as being in a good chance of seeing above normal precipitation. The European model shows above average precipitation for southeastern Nebraska and kind of about average for everybody else. The GFS is in good agreement with the CPC in painting most of the state and having weather and average conditions going into the middle of July. Temperature, CPC shows a pretty good chance of warm weather going into the middle of the month. This is equal by, the GFS shows this same thing across western Nebraska, not so much the east. The European model actually shows it being actually potentially a little bit cooler across portions of north central Nebraska and about average everywhere else. We were very hot this week. Earlier in the week, we had temperatures over 100 a lot in a good portion of the state, including some temperatures getting over 105 in portions of southwestern and south central Nebraska. We did see just a little bit of improvement on the drought monitor courses across portions of Lincoln and Keith counties, with a little bit of degradation in parts of Box Butte counties, where we just continue to not really get a whole lot of precipitation. Really been drying out a lot here across the eastern United States and portions of the eastern Corn Belt, and of course we've seen some rapid degradation across portions of western Nebraska. In terms of 7-day precipitation, now again, this is Thursday through Wednesday, so we saw tremendous precipitation late last week across portions of Custer, Sherman, Howard, and getting over to Boone counties, and also a lot of heavy rain up here across portions of north central Nebraska and certainly up here further toward the north. We also had a lot of hail reports across portions of eastern Nebraska on Tuesday night. VetDry is also showing rangelands really drying out here, relatively stressed conditions across portions of western Nebraska getting into Wyoming and South Dakota. The soil moisture generally kind of the near normal range across the southern 2/3 of the state, relatively still very, very wet across most of the northern third of the state, drying out a little bit across the southern border. Soil temperatures mostly in the 80s right now after the hot weather earlier this week, and this is our temperature precipitation around for the last 7 days. Thanks. Back to you, Bryce.
Thanks for that update, Eric. Up next, soybean gall midge adult emergence has been observed in several Nebraska counties. Management of this pest has been quite challenging in previous years, as we've shared with you here on Market Journal. Bill Dodd recently caught up with a man in the know when it comes to soybean gall midge. That is Nebraska Extension entomologist Justin McMechan, to find out what producers should know at this point here in the 2024 growing season.
Orange larvae on this one too.
Okay, great.
Soybean gall midge has been a persistent problem over the last several years for soybean producers in eastern Nebraska, and this year will be no exception. By June 5th, soybean gall midge larvae were found on early planted soybeans at the University of Nebraska's Insect Field Laboratory near Mead.
That's pretty normal to see them at this point in the year, and I guess for growers that are looking at making management tactics or trying something, they've done that within the first 10 days of emergence. Most people that are not making management decisions on it want to be scouting and looking for it at the moment. The easiest way to do that is go to the first 2 rows of those soybeans, push that canopy aside so you can look at the base of those stems, look for dark discolorations on the stems. We have some soybeans that are kind of purple in color and they have purple flowers, so that tends to kind of look like soybean gall midge when you first see those, but it should be a lot darker than almost black. You suspect, pull them up, kind of peel back that tissue, and underneath that you might find some white or even orange larvae. We typically find those orange larvae within about 10 to 12 days after first adult emergence. We're not looking at doing anything in the field at this point, but it's good to know they're there, what their abundance is. Typically we start seeing around 20 or more per plant. We'll start seeing dead plants shortly after that. Most places where we're finding pretty infrequent number of plants infested. White larvae, a few orange larvae showing up. All of it kind of matches the timeline of when we started to see adults in the field.
Soybean gall midge is still considered a new species. As such, researchers and producers are still learning more about this invasive species as each growing season passes.
But with very limited knowledge on it, it's challenging. So the more education we can provide people on how to scout for it, how to look for it, the more useful it is to their operation. The other thing about soybean gall midge is it's a pretty devastating pest if it has the right conditions, and we don't necessarily know all those right conditions, so that leaves growers a little on edge. We've had a pretty wet spring, and from the last 4 or 5 years of research, they tend to like wet springs, so that may improve adult survival, and they may cause more losses in soybean fields like we saw in 19 and 20. Those losses can be 18 to 31% on an entire field and take out almost 100% of the field for the first 200 feet. And so whatever we can do to provide information, we conduct about 20 to 26 research projects a year in the field. Some of those are biology and ecology at request of farmers to know more about how this insect works and functions. A lot of those are chemical, cultural, biological with the University of Minnesota. Trying to identify tactics where growers don't have to drastically change their operation to manage this. We have some tactics, but they're, I would say, difficult to adopt and go against kind of where we've gone with our production system in the last 2 or 3 decades.
With a new species that can be as destructive as soybean gall midge, it's paramount for institutions like the University of Nebraska to use the resources available to them to learn as much as they can about this invasive pest. That's why UNL has partnered with several other universities to create the Soybean Gall Midge Alert System.
We're tracking with some emergence cages. They're western corn rootworm emergence cages, so another well-known $2 billion plus pest in the Midwest. Those cages work great on soybean gall midge. We put them in last year's soybean field, so growers that saw issues the previous year, we put cages on top of those infested plants that they overwinter in that soil. And then we check every day in the field starting in about mid-May all the way through until we at least get first emergence at all of our sites. All that information is fed into soybeangallmidge.org, which is a multi-state group. So it's us in Nebraska, including the Northeast with Nikki Lur. We have Iowa, Minnesota, and South Dakota. That trapping network allows for a kind of early designation that in fact it is emerging and where it's emerging. And growers can sign up so they can actually get a phone call, text message, and email when it first emerges. A lot of that group it's informational. They just want to know it's there. They can place risk on the planting dates they put out. So some of them got in really early this year ahead of all those rains that we got. They're at a little higher risk for early and higher infestations of soybean gall midge, so they may want to watch a little closer. And those that are later may be hopeful that their plants don't get to a susceptible stage before we stop seeing emergence as part of that same network. So it adds a lot to the understanding of risk that they might expect to see from those fields and the continued follow-up on those fields.
With several years of observation, it seems that this pest is doing its best to keep its footing in places where it's already been observed. And it's slowly expanding into new territories as well.
Has it expanded or gained? Yeah, I'd say in some areas that were new to infestations that we found over time got considerably worse. And so its profile and geographic representation has changed over the years. In areas like around Lincoln, Nebraska here, Lancaster, Cass, Odo, Saunders have been tough. It's been tough for those farmers since the start, and it's still tough now. And so it's been interesting to watch its change, and we're connecting that to some management practices. Some are adjustable, others are not. And then environmental conditions and rotations and things that might be more conducive for it. And that might limit it in places like in Nebraska going west. We found it all the way out to Custer County, which for those that know soybeans, there's not a lot of soybeans out in Custer County, but those corn-soybean rotations out there that are maintained over time, it seems to get established in those areas. South central Nebraska, we've never seen a lot down in that area, but it's more corn-soybean rotation, so it's a little bit harder on that insect to get established.
We're positive for the gall.
While it's too late in the season to apply any mitigation strategies for soybean gall midge, it's very important to remain vigilant of the pest and continue to plan accordingly for future harvest, planting, and growing seasons. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Todd.
Thank you very much for that information, Bill. If you'd like to keep up with some of the updates concerning soybean gall midge, you heard Justin mention it earlier, the best place to get updates is the website soybeangallmidge.org. Well, that is about all the time we have for this week's show. With the 4th of July holiday coming up this next week, I sure hope you'll find some time to reflect and celebrate. We'll have a special edition of Market Journal on tap for next week, and we hope you'll join us then. But until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.